The morning light filtered through my kitchen blinds as I sat at the breakfast table, staring at the stack of bank statements scattered across the worn oak surface. The familiar scent of my daily coffee had turned bitter in my mouth as I read the same numbers over and over again, hoping they would somehow make more sense. The ceramic mug felt cold between my palms, despite the steam still rising from it. And I could hear the old refrigerator humming its usual tune in the corner of my quiet kitchen. My name is Margaret Edwards. I'm 61 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had a handle on my life. The morning sun cast long shadows across the financial documents that had become my obsession, each page filled with transactions and account summaries that painted a picture I never expected to see. My reading glasses sat crooked on my nose as I leaned closer to examine a particular entry that made my stomach churn with a familiar dread. This story changed my life forever. If you want more stories like this, please subscribe and hit that like button. Where are you watching from? The sound of footsteps on my front porch made me quickly gather the papers into a messy pile. Through the sheer curtains of my living room window, I could see my daughter Rachel Edwards Murphy approaching the front door with that determined stride I'd come to recognize over the past month. Her auburn hair was pulled back in the same tight bun she'd worn since starting her new job at the law firm, and she carried that oversized leather briefcase that made her look more serious than the little girl who used to build pillow forts in this very living room. "Mom, we need to talk," Rachel called through the screen door, not bothering to knock. Her voice carried that tone I'd been hearing more frequently lately, the one that made me feel like a child being called to the principal's office. The familiar creak of the front door opening echoed through the house as she let herself in, something that used to feel natural, but now made me tense. I could smell her expensive perfume mixing with the lingering aroma of the bacon I'd cooked for breakfast, creating an odd combination that somehow captured the strangeness of our recent interactions. Rachel's heels clicked against the hardwood floors of the entryway as she made her way toward the kitchen, each step sounding more purposeful than the last. "I was just having my morning coffee," I said, forcing my voice to sound casual while sliding the bank statements under a dish towel. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller with Rachel standing in the doorway, her sharp business suit contrasting with the homey yellow walls I'd painted 5 years ago when her father was still alive. Rachel's eyes swept across the kitchen with the same methodical attention I'd seen her use when reviewing legal documents. She noticed everything: the small pile of unopened mail on the counter, the grocery list stuck to the refrigerator with the magnet she'd made in 3rd grade, and the slight tremor in my hands as I reached for my coffee mug. "Mom, I've been talking to Uncle David," she began, setting her briefcase on the counter with a soft thud. "He's concerned about some things he's noticed lately." My brother David Edwards had always been the practical one in our family, the accountant who balanced his checkbook to the penny and never missed a bill payment in his life. At 58, he still lived in the same neighborhood where we'd grown up, in a house so organized it looked like a furniture showroom. When Rachel mentioned his name, I felt a familiar knot form in my stomach. "What kind of things?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew where this conversation was heading. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed, its steady rhythm matching the quickening pace of my heartbeat. Through the window above the sink, I could see Mrs. Peterson working in her garden next door, her gray hair covered by the same faded sun hat she'd worn for the past decade. Patricia Peterson had been my neighbor and closest friend for 15 years, always ready with a cup of sugar or a listening ear when life got complicated. Rachel pulled out a chair and sat across from me at the table, her expression serious but tinged with something that looked like pity. "He mentioned that you seemed confused when you called him last week about Dad's life insurance policy. And there was that incident at the grocery store where you couldn't remember where you parked the car. The memory of wandering through the parking lot at Miller's Market flooded back, along with the embarrassment I'd felt when the young bag boy had helped me find my blue Honda Civic 3 rows away from where I thought I'd left it. The afternoon sun had been beating down on the hot asphalt, and I'd felt foolish and old as I thanked him with shaking hands. "Everyone forgets where they park sometimes," I said, but even to my own ears, the words sounded defensive. Rachel leaned forward, her elbows on the table, and I caught a whiff of the mint gum she always chewed when she was nervous. "Mom, there have been other things. You called me at 2 a.m. last Tuesday, asking about Dad's funeral arrangements, wanting to know if we'd picked out flowers yet." The conversation felt like walking through fog, with familiar landmarks appearing and disappearing without warning. I remembered making that phone call, but the details felt fuzzy around the edges, like trying to recall a dream after waking up. As we sat there in my sunny kitchen, surrounded by the comfortable clutter of a life well lived, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was shifting in my relationship with my daughter. The woman across from me looked like Rachel, sounded like Rachel, but there was something different in her eyes, something that made me feel like I was being studied rather than loved. Suddenly, the pieces aligned. That phone call was at 10 in the evening, not 2 a.m, I said quietly, surprised by how clearly I remembered the exact time. And I wasn't asking about funeral arrangements. I was asking if you'd gotten the flowers I sent for your promotion at work. Rachel's face flushed slightly, and she looked down at her hands. "Mom, you might be misremembering." "No, Rachel. I remember perfectly because I was watching the evening news when I called, and Tom Brokaw was just finishing the headlines." I stood up and walked to the window, watching Patricia tend to her roses with the same methodical care she'd always shown. "And about David mentioning I seemed confused about your father's life insurance? I called to ask him a simple question about updating the beneficiary information, and he spent 20 minutes trying to convince me I didn't need to make any changes." The silence stretched between us, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Patricia's garden shears. When I turned back to Rachel, her expression had changed from concern to something I couldn't quite identify. "Mom, why would you want to change Dad's beneficiary information?" "Everything's been settled for months." "Because I wanted to add a donation to the animal shelter where your father volunteered. It's something we discussed before he passed." I sat back down, studying my daughter's face carefully. David seemed very resistant to the idea, which struck me as odd since it's my decision to make. Rachel shifted uncomfortably in her chair, and I noticed she'd stopped chewing her gum. "Well, maybe he was just trying to protect you from making hasty decisions while you're still grieving." "Hasty decisions?" I felt my voice rising slightly. "Rachel, your father died 8 months ago. I think I'm past the point of making emotional choices I'll regret later." The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the cheerful yellow walls seeming to close in around us. Rachel was looking everywhere except directly at me, her fingers drumming nervously against the wooden table surface. "There's something else we need to discuss," she said finally. "I've been talking to David about your financial situation, and we think it might be helpful if I took a more active role in managing things. Just temporarily, of course, until you're feeling more like yourself." The words hit me like cold water. "What kind of active role?" "Power of attorney. It would just make everything easier. I could handle the bills, make sure nothing gets overlooked, help with any legal documents that need attention." Rachel's voice had taken on a careful, practiced tone that reminded me of how she used to explain her poor report cards when she was in high school. I felt the ground shifting beneath me, and suddenly, David's reluctance about the insurance policy and Rachel's convenient examples of my supposed confusion began to form a pattern I didn't like. And whose idea was this arrangement? It was a mutual decision. David thinks it makes sense from a legal standpoint, and I want to help take care of you the way you took care of Dad. Through the window, I saw Patricia straightening up from her flower bed, one hand pressed to her lower back. She'd been dealing with arthritis for years, but never let it stop her from maintaining the most beautiful garden on the block. Patricia had also been the one person who'd listened without judgment when I'd shared my concerns about some of Rachel's recent behavior. "I need to think about this," I said. "Of course, but Mom, there's actually some urgency here." Rachel pulled a manila envelope from her purse. "David has already drawn up the paperwork. He said if we get it notarized this week, it could be in effect before the end of the month." The envelope sat on the table between us like an unwelcome visitor. I stared at it, remembering how my own mother had warned me years ago to be careful about anyone who tried to rush important decisions. "Why the hurry, Rachel?" "It's not a hurry, it's just efficient. And honestly, Mom, some of us are worried about you living alone in this big house. Maybe it's time to consider other options." The conversation was moving too fast, covering too much ground, and I felt like I was trying to follow a map with half the landmarks missing. But one thing was becoming crystal clear. My daughter had put considerable thought and planning into this visit. "What other options?" "Well, there are some lovely retirement communities nearby. Places where you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance and upkeep, where there are people around if you need help." Rachel's voice had taken on that bright, enthusiastic tone people use when they're trying to sell something. "I actually picked up some brochures." She reached into her purse again, and I watched in growing amazement as she produced a stack of glossy pamphlets featuring smiling elderly people engaged in various activities. The preparation was impressive and deeply unsettling. "You've been busy," I said. "I've been concerned. We all have." "We?" Rachel hesitated for just a moment. "David, Michael, and me. We've all noticed changes, Mom. Small things, but they're adding up." Michael, my son who lived 2 hours away and called every Sunday evening at exactly 7 o'clock. Michael, who'd been unusually quiet during our last few conversations, asking odd questions about my daily routine and whether I was remembering to take my medications. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity, but I needed to be sure. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't part of whatever was happening here. "I'm going to walk over and visit Patricia for a few minutes," I announced, standing up abruptly. Rachel glanced at her watch. "Mom, we really should finish discussing this. I have to drive back tonight, and there's still so much to cover." "The discussion can wait. Patricia asked me to help her identify some pest that's been eating her tomato plants." It was a small lie, but I needed space to think, and Patricia's clear-eyed perspective on people and situations. "But the paperwork will still be there when I get back." I was already moving toward the door, grabbing my light sweater from the hook by the kitchen entrance. As I stepped outside into the warm afternoon air, I heard Rachel call after me, and her voice carried a note of frustration that confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. This conversation wasn't going according to her carefully laid plans. Patricia looked up as I approached her garden gate, her weathered face breaking into a smile. But when she saw my expression, her demeanor immediately shifted to concern. "What's wrong, dear?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Patricia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." I glanced back toward my house, where I could see Rachel's silhouette in the kitchen window. "Have you noticed me acting confused or forgetful lately? Have I seemed like I'm losing my memory?" Patricia straightened up fully, setting down her garden shears and giving me her complete attention. What kind of question is that? You're one of the sharpest people I know. Just last week you helped me figure out why my cable bill was so high, remember? Found that extra premium channel I'd been paying for without realizing it. Relief flooded through me, but I needed to be certain. What about my behavior? Have I seemed disoriented or scattered? The only thing I've noticed is that you seem worried about something. You've been quieter than usual, more watchful. Patricia frowned. Why are you asking me this? Before I could answer, I saw Rachel emerge from my kitchen and start walking toward Patricia's garden, with determined steps, and an expression I recognized from her teenage years when she was about to demand something she had no right to expect. But what Rachel said next would reveal the true scope of what I was facing. Patricia's weathered hands found mine, giving them a reassuring squeeze. Margaret, you're scaring me. What's really going on? I watched Rachel approach with that purposeful stride I knew too well. My stomach tightened as I realized I was about to witness exactly how far this deception had spread. Had Rachel already spoken to Patricia? Was my neighbor, one of my closest friends, already part of whatever narrative my daughter was constructing? I think I'm about to find out, I murmured. Rachel reached the garden gate, and her smile looked practiced, almost theatrical. Hi, Patricia. Sorry to interrupt, but I was hoping to ask you something important. Patricia straightened, her grip on my hands never loosening. What's that, dear? Have you noticed anything concerning about Mom lately? Any signs of confusion or memory problems? I know you two spend a lot of time together, so you'd be in a good position to observe any changes. The directness of it stunned me. Here was my daughter, attempting to recruit my friend as a witness to my supposed decline. But what struck me even more was the calculated way she phrased it, as if she'd practiced this conversation. Patricia's response was immediate and firm. The only thing I've noticed about your mother is that she's been more worried than usual. But confused? Absolutely not. Just yesterday she helped me balance my checkbook when I couldn't figure out why the numbers weren't adding up. Found an error I'd made 3 weeks ago. I saw something flicker across Rachel's face, a micro-expression of annoyance before she rearranged her features back into concern. Sometimes people with early dementia can have good days and bad days. They can seem completely normal one moment and then... Rachel. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Stop. Both women looked at me, but their expressions couldn't have been more different. Patricia showed concern and support, while Rachel's face revealed something I was finally allowing myself to recognize. Frustration that her carefully constructed story wasn't being accepted without question. Mom, I'm just trying to get a complete picture of what's happening with you. No, I said, the pieces of understanding clicking into place with devastating clarity. You're trying to build a case. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of accusations unspoken. Patricia looked between Rachel and me, her face showing the dawning realization that she was witnessing something far more serious than a simple family disagreement. A case for what? Rachel asked, but her voice had lost its concerned daughter tone and taken on something harder, more defensive. I thought about the papers still sitting on my kitchen table, about the doctor's appointment I apparently couldn't remember making, about how Rachel had insisted I must be getting confused about our conversations. I thought about how she'd seemed so prepared with solutions to problems I didn't know I had. Patricia? I said, never taking my eyes off Rachel. Has anyone else asked you about my mental state recently? Maybe in the past few weeks? What do you mean? I mean, has anyone called you, or stopped by, or approached you at the grocery store to ask about whether I seemed confused or forgetful? Patricia frowned, thinking. Well, now that you mention it, David did ask me something similar when I ran into him at the pharmacy last week. My heart sank. David, my son who lived 3 hours away, who I spoke to maybe once a month. David, who Rachel had probably called with her concerns about my failing memory. Rachel's face had gone very still. David was just worried about you, Mom. We both are. Worried enough to coordinate your stories? Worried enough to have him question my neighbors while you arrange for power of attorney documents? The words hung in the air between us, and I watched my daughter's expression shift through several emotions before settling on something that looked almost like relief, as if she was tired of pretending. Someone needs to look out for your interests, Mom. If you can't see that you're having problems, then what, Rachel? Then you'll make sure everyone else believes I am? Patricia stepped closer to me, a gesture of solidarity that gave me strength. Margaret, what exactly is going on here? Before I could answer, Rachel pulled out her phone. I think we should all calm down and discuss this rationally. Maybe I should call David. He has some things to say that might help clarify the situation. As she began dialing, I realized with growing horror that David's voice on that call would reveal just how deep this deception went, and whether my son was a willing participant in whatever Rachel was orchestrating. I watched Rachel's thumb hover over her phone screen, and something inside me snapped into sharp focus. The fog of confusion and self-doubt that had been clouding my thoughts for weeks suddenly lifted, replaced by a crystalline clarity I hadn't felt in months. Put the phone down, Rachel. My voice carried an authority that surprised even me. Rachel looked up, her finger still poised to make the call. Mom, I really think we should get David on the line. He's been worried sick about you, and he has some observations that might help Patricia understand what we're dealing with. I said, put it down. I stepped forward, close enough to see the slight tremor in Rachel's hand. Whatever script you and David have rehearsed, whatever stories you've coordinated, I don't want to hear them right now. Patricia moved closer to my side, her presence warm and reassuring. Margaret's right. This conversation is between the people in this room. We don't need anyone else weighing in right now. Rachel's carefully constructed mask of concern was beginning to crack. She lowered the phone, but didn't put it away, clutching it like a lifeline. You're both being unreasonable. I'm trying to help here. Help with what, exactly? I asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to convince everyone that I'm incompetent so you can take control of my finances. The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and impossible to ignore. Rachel's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, anger, calculation, and finally something that looked almost like resignation. Mom, you're 73 years old. You live alone in a house that's too big for you. You've been making some questionable decisions lately, and yes, David and I are concerned. Is that really so terrible? What questionable decisions? I demanded. Be specific. Rachel gestured vaguely with her free hand. The mix-up with your doctor's appointment. Forgetting our conversations. Last month, you bought 2 of the same book because you couldn't remember purchasing the first one. I bought 2 copies of the same book because I wanted to give one to Patricia as a gift. We'd talked about it at book club. I turned to Patricia. The new Louise Penny novel, remember? Patricia nodded slowly. You brought it to me the next week. Said you thought I'd enjoy it. I saw something flicker across Rachel's face. A moment of uncertainty, as if she was recalculating her strategy. Well, what about the confusion with your medications? You called me last Tuesday saying you couldn't remember if you'd taken your blood pressure pills. I called you because I was trying a new system of organizing my pills and wanted to double-check that I was doing it right. That's called being careful, not confused. Each of Rachel's examples was crumbling under scrutiny, and I could see her growing more agitated. She began pacing in the small space of my living room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor with sharp staccato beats. "You're twisting everything around," she said, her voice rising slightly. "David was there when you called him completely disoriented about what day it was. When was this supposed to have happened?" 2 weeks ago. You called him at work, completely confused about whether it was Tuesday or Thursday. I thought back carefully, sorting through my memories with newfound determination. 2 weeks ago, on Tuesday, I called David to ask if he remembered what day of the week Grandma's birthday fell on this year. I was planning ahead for the anniversary of her death and wanted to make sure I had the right day to visit the cemetery. I wasn't confused about what day it was. I was trying to figure out what day her birthday would be. Patricia was watching this exchange with growing alarm, her eyes moving between Rachel and me like she was watching a tennis match where the stakes kept getting higher. "Rachel," Patricia said quietly, "it sounds like there might be some misunderstandings here." "Misunderstandings?" Rachel's laugh had a brittle edge to it. "I've been watching my mother decline for months. You don't see her every day. You don't know how she's been struggling." "But I do see her twice a week," Patricia countered, her voice growing firmer. "At book club and at our coffee dates. She seems as sharp as ever to me. If anything, she's been more engaged lately, more involved in discussions." Rachel whirled around to face Patricia, and for just a moment, her mask slipped completely. I saw something in my daughter's expression that chilled me, a cold calculation that had nothing to do with concern for my welfare. "You don't understand the full picture," Rachel said, her voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "There are financial considerations here. Mom's portfolio has taken some hits recently, and she needs someone with experience to help manage her assets properly." And there it was. The truth, finally surfacing like oil on water. "My portfolio is fine, Rachel. I review it monthly with my financial advisor." "Mom, you're 73. You shouldn't be making complex financial decisions on your own anymore." "Says who? I have the same mind I've always had. I'm not showing any signs of dementia or cognitive decline. The only person who seems to think I am is you." I paused, studying my daughter's face. "The question is why?" Rachel's phone buzzed in her hand, and she glanced down at it reflexively. Whatever she saw there made her expression shift again, this time towards something that looked almost like panic. "I should take this," she said, but I reached out and gently but firmly took the phone from her hands. The text message on the screen was from David. "How did it go? Did she sign the papers?" The three of us stood in silence, the weight of that message settling over the room like a heavy blanket. Patricia drew in a sharp breath, and Rachel's face had gone completely pale. "Well," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I think we all know what this is really about now." I held the phone in my trembling hands, reading that damning text again. "How did it go? Did she sign the papers?" The words seemed to pulse with accusation, each syllable confirming what I'd been trying not to believe about my own daughter. The silence in my living room stretched taut as a wire. Rachel stood frozen, her face cycling through expressions like she was shuffling through masks, trying to find one that might still work. Patricia had sunk back into her chair, one hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. My mind was racing now, connecting dots I'd been willfully blind to for weeks. All those casual questions about my financial advisor. The way Rachel had insisted on coming to my last doctor's appointment, then spent the entire time asking leading questions about memory and cognitive function while I sat there bewildered. The sudden concern about my confusion that had materialized out of nowhere. "Mom, that's not what it looks like," Rachel said, but her voice had lost all its earlier conviction. She reached for the phone, but I stepped back, clutching it against my chest. "Isn't it? Because it looks like you and David have been planning to have me declared incompetent so you can control my money." The words tasted bitter in my mouth. "My own daughter." "It's not about the money, not really. It's about protecting you." But even as she said it, Rachel couldn't meet my eyes. "You're getting older, and there are people who prey on elderly women. Scammers, financial predators. We just want to make sure you're safe." "Safe from what? I haven't fallen for any scams. I haven't given money to strangers. I haven't made any questionable investments." My voice was rising, decades of suppressed frustration finally finding an outlet. The only person who seems to be trying to manipulate me financially is standing right in front of me. Patricia cleared her throat softly. "Rachel, I've known your mother for 15 years. She's one of the most financially savvy people I know. She helped me understand my retirement planning after Tom died." "If she's declining mentally, I would have noticed." "You see her twice a week," Rachel snapped, her composure finally cracking completely. "I'm family. I have responsibilities here that you couldn't possibly understand." "What responsibilities?" I demanded. "I pay my own bills. I manage my own household. I drive myself places. I volunteer at 3 different organizations. What exactly do you think you need to protect me from?" Rachel's phone buzzed with another message, still in my hands. This time, it was David again. "The lawyer says if she won't sign willingly, we need documented incidents of confusion or poor judgment. Can you get her doctor to put something in writing?" The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I actually staggered backward, bumping into the bookshelf behind me. Patricia was on her feet instantly, her hand on my arm to steady me. "They've been to a lawyer," I whispered, then louder. "You've already been to a lawyer about this. You and David have been planning this." Rachel's face crumpled, but whether with genuine remorse or just frustration at being caught, I couldn't tell anymore. "Mom, please, you have to understand. David thinks—" "I don't care what David thinks. David isn't my child. You are." My voice broke on the last word. "How long have you been planning this? How long have you been watching me, waiting for me to slip up so you could use it against me? It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my daughter has been systematically trying to undermine my competency so she can steal control of my finances." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Patricia was still holding my arm, and I could feel her tension, her uncertainty about whether she should stay or leave. This was family business, ugly family business, and she was caught in the middle of it. "Patricia, I'm sorry you're seeing this," I said, not taking my eyes off Rachel. "Don't apologize. I'm glad I'm here. Someone needs to witness what's really happening." Rachel whirled on Patricia then, her desperation making her reckless. "This isn't your family. This isn't your business. You don't understand the complexities of what we're dealing with." "I understand perfectly well. I understand that your mother is a competent, intelligent woman who's being manipulated by her own daughter." Patricia's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "The question is why?" "Because David says—" Rachel started, then stopped, seeming to realize she was about to reveal more than she intended. "David says what?" I pressed. "What does David say that's more important than what I say about my own life?" Rachel's phone buzzed again in my hands. Another message from David. "If this doesn't work, we'll have to wait for a real incident. Maybe we should consider other options. The room went completely silent, except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. Other options. The phrase sent ice through my veins. Rachel, I said, my voice deadly quiet. What other options is your husband talking about? Rachel went white as paper, her eyes darting between the phone in my hands and my face. The silence stretched so long I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Mom, David didn't mean anything sinister by that. He just meant maybe we should wait and see if... She trailed off, realizing she was digging herself deeper. Wait and see if what, Rachel? If I actually do something that proves I'm incompetent? Or if you can manufacture something that looks convincing enough? My hands were shaking now, not from any medical condition, but from pure rage and heartbreak. Patricia stepped closer to me, her presence a steady anchor in this storm. Helen, maybe we should sit down. All of us. I don't want to sit down. I want my daughter to explain what her husband meant by other options. I held up the phone again. Because this message makes it sound like you two are disappointed that I'm not actually losing my mind fast enough for your timeline. Rachel finally sank back into the chair, covering her face with her hands. When she looked up, there were tears streaming down her cheeks. But I found I didn't care anymore. I'd seen her cry to get her way too many times over the years. David thinks that if you had a small accident, something minor that required hospitalization, it would be easier to prove you need help managing things. He said old people fall all the time, and if you were confused after a fall, even temporarily, it would give us the documentation we need. The words hit me like slaps. Patricia actually gasped beside me. An accident, I repeated slowly. Your husband wants me to have an accident. Not a real accident, just something small that would get you into the hospital where they could evaluate you properly. Rachel was talking faster now, as if speed could somehow make her words less horrifying. David knows people at the hospital. He could make sure you were seen by the right doctors, ones who understand the situation. The situation being that I'm perfectly healthy and competent, but you want to steal my money. It's not stealing. It's protecting you from yourself. Mom, you bought that expensive mixer last month without even thinking about it. You're spending money on things you don't need. I bought a KitchenAid mixer because I wanted to start baking again. That's not dementia, Rachel. That's called having interests. Patricia was pacing now, her hands clenched into fists. This is unbelievable. You're talking about having your mother committed based on a kitchen appliance purchase. You don't understand the full picture, Rachel shot back. Mom gave $200 to some charity last week without researching it properly. She's being impulsive with money. It was the food bank, Rachel. The same food bank I've donated to for 15 years. The same one where I volunteered when you were in high school. I felt exhausted suddenly, worn down by the effort of defending perfectly normal choices. When did living my life become evidence that I can't live my life? Rachel's phone buzzed with an incoming call. David's name flashed on the screen. I answered it before Rachel could reach for the phone. Hello, David. There was a pause. Helen? Where's Rachel? Your wife is right here, listening to me ask you about these other options you've been discussing, the ones involving accidents and hospital evaluations. Another pause, longer this time. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I don't think there has. I think you and my daughter have been planning to have me declared incompetent so you can control my finances, and when that didn't work quickly enough, you started talking about manufacturing situations that would make me look confused or impaired. Helen, you're upset, and I understand that, but you're not thinking clearly about this. Rachel is worried about you. We both are. David, let me be very clear about something. If anything happens to me, anything at all, the police will know exactly where to look. Patricia is here witnessing this entire conversation, and I'm going to document every word of it. Are you threatening us? I'm protecting myself from you. I hung up and handed the phone back to Rachel, who looked like she might be sick. Mom, I never said I agreed with David about the accident thing. I told him it was too risky. Too risky, I repeated. Not too wrong, not too cruel. Too risky. Patricia was staring at Rachel with undisguised disgust. Do you hear yourself? You're talking about orchestrating your mother's injury like it's a business decision. I'm trying to take care of her before something really bad happens. Nothing bad is happening to me, Rachel. Nothing except my own daughter trying to destroy my life. I walked to the front door and opened it. I want you to leave now. Mom, please, we need to finish talking about this. No, we don't. We need you to leave my house and stay away until you've figured out whether you're my daughter or David's accomplice. Because right now, I honestly don't know which one you are. Rachel gathered her purse with shaking hands, but she stopped at the door. What about the power of attorney paperwork? David's going to ask. The question was so absurd, so tone-deaf, that I actually laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. Tell David that if he wants power of attorney over my finances, he can get it the same way everyone else does. He can wait for me to die. After Rachel left, Patricia and I stood in my living room, the silence heavy with everything that had just happened. Finally, Patricia spoke. Helen, I'm scared for you. If they're talking about staging accidents, I know. I'm scared too. I sank into my chair, feeling every one of my 73 years. But I don't know what to do about it. How do you protect yourself from your own family? Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her purse and pulled out her phone. What are you doing? I asked. Something I should have suggested an hour ago, she said, dialing. We need help, and I know exactly who to call. Patricia, wait. I reached for her arm as she held the phone. Who are you calling? She paused, looking at me with concern. I was going to call my lawyer, but you're right to stop me. This isn't my decision to make. I felt a wave of relief mixed with gratitude. Thank you. I need to think about this more carefully. If I involve lawyers or police right now, based on what we overheard, it might make things worse with Rachel. Patricia sat back down, setting her phone aside. Helen, I understand wanting to protect your relationship with your daughter, but what we just heard was terrifying. David was talking about staging an accident. I know, and Rachel said it was too risky, not too wrong. That's what's killing me. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. But she also came here tonight to warn me. She could have just gone along with David's plan. Or she could be playing both sides, Patricia said gently, testing the waters to see which approach would work better. The thought made my stomach turn. I don't want to believe that about my own daughter. I don't want you to have to believe it either. But Helen, we need to be realistic about what's happening here. Before I could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. We both froze. Mom? Rachel's voice came through the door. I know you told me to leave, but I forgot something. Can I come in for just a minute? Patricia and I exchanged glances. What did you forget? I called back. My reading glasses. I left them on your kitchen table. I walked to the kitchen and looked. There were no glasses on the table. There never had been. Rachel didn't even wear reading glasses. My blood ran cold. Patricia, I whispered. She's lying. There are no glasses here. Patricia's face went pale. Don't open the door. Mom, I really need to get them. I can't drive home without them. I stood by the door, my heart pounding. Rachel, I don't see any glasses in here. They might have fallen on the floor. Please, Mom, it'll just take a second. The desperation in her voice was different now. This wasn't my daughter asking for help. This was something else entirely. Rachel, you don't wear reading glasses. There was a long pause. Then, Mom, you're confused again. I've worn reading glasses for 2 years now. This is exactly what David and I have been worried about. Patricia moved closer to me, and I could see the fear in her eyes. Rachel was trying to gaslight me right here, right now, after everything we'd just discussed. If you need glasses to drive, call David to pick you up, I said through the door. I already called him. He's on his way, but he suggested I get my glasses first, so we could talk to you together when he gets here. My mouth went dry. Talk to me about what? About getting you the help you need, Mom. After our conversation tonight, we're both really concerned about your mental state. David thinks we might need to take more immediate action. Patricia grabbed my arm and mouthed the word phone. I understood immediately. David wasn't coming to help Rachel find glasses. They were coming back together tonight, while Patricia was here as a witness to whatever they had planned. Rachel, I'm tired. Whatever you and David want to discuss can wait until tomorrow. Mom, please. David's almost here. He's bringing some paperwork that might help clarify things for you. Paperwork. My hands started shaking. What kind of paperwork? Just some documents that might help you understand why we're so worried, and maybe make it easier for us to help you with your finances until you're feeling more like yourself. There it was. They were coming back tonight with power of attorney documents, probably hoping to overwhelm me or confuse me into signing. Patricia, I whispered. What do I do? She was already moving toward the back of the house. Do you have a back door? I nodded. Then we're leaving. Right now. But this is my house. Helen, if they're coming back with documents and they're this determined, we need to get you somewhere safe where you can think clearly. I could hear a car pulling into my driveway. Mom, Rachel called. David's here. We're both coming in now. I didn't say you could come in, I called back, but I heard the sound of a key in the lock. The sound of the key turning made my blood run cold. I had given Rachel that key for emergencies, never imagining she would use it like this. Helen, we need to go now, Patricia whispered urgently, grabbing my purse from the kitchen counter. I could hear footsteps in my front hallway, followed by David's voice. Mom, we're here to help. We just want to talk. Patricia was already at my back door, turning the deadbolt as quietly as she could. Do you have somewhere we can go? Somewhere they won't think to look for you tonight? My mind was racing. There's a 24-hour diner about 10 minutes away. I used to go there with your mother when we worked late shifts at the hospital. Perfect. Let's go. We slipped out through my back door, just as I heard Rachel calling from the living room. Mom, where are you? We saw your car in the driveway. Patricia guided me around the side of my house, staying in the shadows. Her car was parked 2 houses down, and we moved as quickly and quietly as we could. Mom? Rachel's voice was getting louder, more frustrated. This is exactly the kind of behavior that has us worried. Hiding from your own family isn't normal. I could hear David's voice too, though I couldn't make out his words. They were moving through my house, looking for me. We reached Patricia's car and got in. She started the engine and pulled away from the curb slowly, without turning on her headlights until we were around the corner. I can't believe I just snuck out of my own house like a teenager, I said, my hands still shaking. You did what you had to do, Patricia replied. Helen, what Rachel just did, using her key without permission and bringing David over with paperwork at night, That's not normal family concern. That's calculated. We drove in silence for a few minutes before I spoke again. What if she's right, though? What if I am losing my mind, and this is all just paranoid thinking? Patricia glanced at me. Do you really believe that? I thought about everything that had happened tonight. Rachel's lies, her manipulation, the way she'd tried to gaslight me about the reading glasses she'd never worn. No, I said quietly. I don't. The diner was nearly empty when we arrived. We chose a booth in the back corner, and I ordered coffee with hands that were finally starting to steady. So, what's the plan? Patricia asked. They're probably still at your house right now, and they'll figure out you left soon enough. I need to understand what they're really after, I said. And I need to protect myself legally before they try something like this again. Patricia nodded. First thing tomorrow, we need to get you to someone who can help you understand your options. Someone who specializes in this kind of family financial manipulation. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Rachel. Mom, where are you? We're worried sick. David and I just want to help you. Please come home so we can talk about this calmly. I showed the message to Patricia. Even now, she's trying to make it sound like I'm the problem. Don't respond yet, Patricia advised. Let's think this through first. Another message came in, this time from David. Helen, I know you're scared, but running away isn't going to solve anything. We have resources that could really help you manage things better. Rachel told me about some of the confusion you've been having with bills and appointments. What confusion? I asked aloud. I haven't had any confusion with bills or appointments. Patricia leaned forward. Helen, this is important. Have you missed any appointments recently? Forgotten to pay any bills? Anything at all that Rachel could be using to build a case that you're incompetent? I thought carefully. No, I keep a detailed calendar, and I pay all my bills online. I even print out confirmation receipts. Good. Do you have documentation of that? Yes, everything's organized in files in my home office, which Rachel probably has access to right now. Patricia pointed out grimly. My phone buzzed again. Rachel. Mom, please just let us know you're safe. We're not trying to hurt you. We love you. The word love felt like a slap. If this was love, it was a twisted version I didn't recognize. I need to go back, I said suddenly. I can't let them go through my personal papers unsupervised. Helen, no, that's exactly what they want. But those files have my bank statements, my investment records, everything. If they're building some kind of case against me, I can't just hand them the ammunition. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. What if we called the police? And said what? That my daughter used the key I gave her to enter my house? That she brought documents she wants me to sign? I'm not sure that's illegal. But entering without permission might be. My phone rang. It was Rachel. Don't answer it, Patricia said quickly. But something in me had shifted. I was tired of running, tired of being afraid in my own life. Hello, Rachel. Mom, thank God. Where are you? We've been looking everywhere. I'm somewhere safe, thinking about everything you've told me tonight. Mom, you don't need to be afraid of us. We're family. Rachel, why did you tell David I've been confused about bills and appointments when that's not true? There was a pause. Mom, you have been confused. Just last week you called me asking about a bill you thought you hadn't paid, but you had already paid it twice. That never happened, Rachel. See, this is what I mean. You don't remember. Patricia was shaking her head vigorously, pointing at the phone. Rachel, I want you and David to leave my house now. Mom, we can't do that. We're too worried about you. David thinks we should call for a wellness check. My stomach dropped. A wellness check? Just to make sure you're okay. To have a professional assess whether you're safe on your own right now. Patricia grabbed my arm and mouthed, "Hang up." But I needed to hear this, needed to understand exactly what I was facing. What kind of professional, Rachel? Someone who specializes in cognitive assessment for seniors. David knows someone who could come out tonight, just to talk to you. At midnight? Mom, this is an emergency situation. You disappeared from your own house. That's not normal behavior. I looked at Patricia, who was frantically scribbling something on a napkin. She pushed it toward me. They're trying to have you declared incompetent tonight. Rachel, I'm hanging up now. Mom, wait. If you don't come home in the next hour, David is going to have to make that call. We can't just let you wander around in your condition. The line went dead. I stared at Patricia. They're going to try to have me declared incompetent tonight, aren't they? It sounds like it. And if some evaluator shows up at your house and you're not there, they'll probably say your absence proves their point about your mental state. My coffee had gone cold, but I took a sip anyway, trying to think. What if I go back, but you come with me? Patricia shook her head. Helen, I think they're past the point where having a witness will stop them. This feels like they've already made their decision and they're just going through the motions now. My phone buzzed with another text from David. Helen, the evaluator will be at your house at 1 a.m. If you're not there, we'll have no choice but to assume you're not capable of making safe decisions for yourself. I showed the message to Patricia. An evaluator at 1 a.m.? She said incredulously. What kind of legitimate professional works at 1 a.m.? The kind who gets paid extra to rubber stamp whatever Rachel and David want, I said, the full scope of their plan finally becoming clear. So what do we do? I looked at my watch. It was 12:15 a.m. I think, I said slowly, it's time to stop running and start fighting back. Patricia leaned forward across the small diner table. What exactly are you thinking, Helen? I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my banking app. I'm thinking that if Rachel has been so concerned about my finances, she should see exactly what she's trying to get control of. My fingers moved deliberately across the screen, taking screenshots of my account balances, my recent transactions, my investment portfolios. Everything showed a clear, organized financial picture, with no signs of confusion or mismanagement. Look at this, I said, showing Patricia the screen. Every bill paid on time, no duplicate payments, no mysterious purchases, nothing that suggests someone who can't handle their own money. Patricia studied the phone. Helen, this is smart, but will Rachel even look at evidence that contradicts what she wants to believe? Maybe not Rachel, I said. But what about this mysterious evaluator who's supposedly coming to my house? If I show up with documentation proving my competence, what can they possibly say? My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Rachel. Mom, where are you? The evaluator will be here in 30 minutes. I typed back, I'll be there. Patricia grabbed my wrist gently. Helen, are you sure about this? Walking into what might be an ambush? I've been running scared for weeks, I said, gathering my purse. Questioning myself every time Rachel pointed out some supposedly forgotten conversation or unpaid bill. But sitting here tonight, talking it through with you, I realized something important. What's that? I'm not losing my mind. I'm being gaslit by my own daughter. The word hung in the air between us. Patricia nodded slowly. That's a strong accusation, Helen. But it fits, doesn't it? The constant questioning of my memory, the insistence that conversations happened that I know didn't happen, The urgency to take control of my finances before I supposedly do something catastrophic. Patricia was quiet for a moment, then said, "What about David? Do you think he's part of this, or is Rachel manipulating him too?" I considered this as we walked toward Patricia's car. David had always been the quieter one, more likely to go along with Rachel's plans than to question them. But lately, his concern had seemed genuine, even if it was based on Rachel's version of events. "I think David genuinely believes I'm having problems because that's what Rachel has convinced him to believe," I said. "Which means tonight isn't just about proving my competence to some evaluator. It's about showing David the truth." We drove through the empty streets toward my house. As we turned onto my block, I could see lights on in my living room and 2 cars in the driveway. "That's Rachel's car," I said, pointing to the silver sedan. "The other one must be David's." Patricia parked across the street. "Do you want me to come in with you?" "No," I said, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. "This is something I need to handle with my children directly." I walked up my own front walkway, feeling like I was approaching a battlefield. Through the window, I could see Rachel pacing in the living room, while David sat heavily in my armchair, looking exhausted. I used my key to open my own front door. "Mom!" Rachel rushed toward me. "Thank God you're okay. We've been so worried." But her relief seemed performative, especially when she immediately followed it with, "The evaluator should be here any minute. I've prepared a list of concerning incidents we need to discuss." David looked up from the chair. "Mom, where have you been? We thought something terrible had happened." "I was having coffee with Patricia," I said simply. "Talking through some things that have been bothering me." Rachel's expression shifted slightly. "What kinds of things?" I sat down on my own couch and looked at both of my children. "I've been thinking about all these memory problems you keep telling me I have, Rachel, and I've realized something interesting." "What's that?" David asked. "I can't seem to remember any of them actually happening." The room went very quiet. Rachel recovered first. "Mom, that's exactly the problem. People with cognitive decline often don't realize they're having difficulties." "That would make sense," I said, "except for this." I pulled out my phone and began showing them the screenshots I'd taken. "My banking records. Every transaction from the past 6 months. Show me these duplicate bill payments you mentioned, Rachel." Rachel glanced at the phone, but didn't take it. "Mom, this isn't about your banking." "Isn't it? You've been telling David and anyone who will listen that I'm making financial mistakes. Here's the proof that I'm not. Look at it." David reached for the phone and began scrolling through the images. His brow furrowed as he studied the orderly financial records. "Rachel," he said slowly, "you told me she'd been paying bills multiple times and overdrawing accounts." "She has been," Rachel insisted. "These records don't show everything." "Actually, they do," I said. "They show every transaction, every balance, every payment, and they show that my finances are in perfect order." A car door slammed outside, and Rachel glanced toward the window with obvious relief. "That must be Dr. Morrison," she said. "Helen, please just cooperate with the evaluation. This is all for your own good." But as footsteps approached the front door, David was still staring at my phone, and for the first time in months, I saw doubt creeping into his expression when he looked at his sister. The doorbell rang, and Rachel moved quickly to answer it. "Dr. Morrison? Thank you so much for coming out so late. We're just desperate to get Mom the help she needs." A woman's voice responded from the doorway, but I couldn't make out the words. David leaned toward me and whispered, "Mom, these financial records, they don't match what Rachel told me at all." I squeezed his hand just as Rachel returned to the living room, followed by a tired-looking woman in her 50s carrying a leather briefcase. "Helen," Rachel said with forced brightness, "this is Dr. Morrison. She's here to help us figure out the best way to keep you safe." But Dr. Morrison was looking around the room with an expression that seemed more puzzled than professional. And I realized that whatever Rachel had told her to expect, it wasn't a competent 70-year-old woman sitting calmly in her own organized living room with documented proof of her mental clarity. "Mrs. Johnson," Dr. Morrison said hesitantly, "I understand there have been some concerns about your cognitive function." I smiled and gestured to the chair across from me. "There have indeed been concerns, Doctor, and I'm very much looking forward to discussing them with you." Dr. Morrison settled into the chair and opened her briefcase, pulling out a clipboard and pen. She glanced around the room again, taking in the neat bookshelves, the organized coffee table, and my calm demeanor. "I have to say, Mrs. Johnson, when your daughter called my office, she described a situation that seems quite different from what I'm observing here." Rachel shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Well, Mom has good days and bad days. And bad. Today might be a good day." "Actually," I said, "I'd like to show you something, Dr. Morrison." I handed her my phone with the banking records still displayed. "My daughter has been telling the family that I'm making financial mistakes, paying bills multiple times, overdrawing accounts. These are my complete banking records from the past 6 months." Dr. Morrison took the phone and began scrolling through the screenshots. Her eyebrows rose as she studied the organized transactions and healthy account balances. "These records appear to be very well managed," she said slowly. "Rachel, you mentioned specific concerns about financial confusion?" Rachel's face flushed. "There have been other things. She forgets conversations, repeats herself, gets confused about dates." "I see." Dr. Morrison turned back to me. "Mrs. Johnson, do you feel you've been experiencing any memory issues or confusion?" "No more than any 70-year-old dealing with stress," I replied. "But I have been experiencing something troubling. My daughter has been undermining my independence and spreading false information about my mental state to my family." David, who had been quiet since seeing my banking records, finally spoke up. "Rachel, I need to ask you something directly. You told me Mom was paying her electric bill 3 times a month and overdrawing her account. But these records show her bills are paid once, on time, every month, and her account has never been overdrawn." Rachel's jaw tightened. "David, you don't see the daily struggles I see. I'm here more often." "Actually," I said, "Rachel visits about twice a month, usually when she needs something." I looked directly at Dr. Morrison. 3 weeks ago, she asked me to co-sign a loan for her. When I declined, that's when these concerns about my mental state began escalating." Dr. Morrison made a note on her clipboard. "I see. And David, you mentioned Rachel had contacted you about power of attorney?" David nodded, looking uncomfortable. "She said it was urgent, that Mom needed someone to handle her finances before she made serious mistakes." "Which brings us to the real issue," I said calmly. "Rachel, would you like to tell Dr. Morrison about the power of attorney documents you had prepared without my knowledge?" The room fell silent. Rachel stared at me, her mouth opening and closing without words. Dr. Morrison set down her pen. "Mrs. Johnson, are you saying that power of attorney documents were prepared without your consent or involvement?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. My daughter has been building a case that I'm incompetent in order to gain control of my finances. She's manipulated information, exaggerated normal senior moments, and convinced my son that I need someone else to manage my money." Rachel finally found her voice. "Mom, that's not true." "I'm worried about you," We all are. No, David said quietly. We're not all worried. I was worried because of what you told me, Rachel. But looking at these financial records, talking to Mom tonight, seeing this organized house and her clear thinking, I'm starting to wonder what's really going on here. Dr. Morrison closed her clipboard. Mrs. Johnson, I came here expecting to evaluate someone with significant cognitive decline. Instead, I find a woman who's organized her financial records, prepared evidence to support her position, and is communicating clearly and logically about a complex family situation. She turned to Rachel. I'm not seeing evidence of the mental incapacity you described over the phone. Rachel's composure finally cracked. She's manipulating all of you. Can't you see that? She's gotten paranoid and suspicious, and now she's turning you against me. Rachel, I said gently, I love you. You're my daughter. But what you've been doing isn't helping me or protecting me. It's been hurting me and our family. David moved closer to my chair. Mom, I owe you an apology. I should have talked to you directly instead of just accepting what Rachel told me. You were trying to look out for me, I said, squeezing his hand. That's not wrong. But families need to communicate openly, not through intermediaries with their own agendas. Dr. Morrison packed her clipboard back into her briefcase. Mrs. Johnson, based on my observation tonight, I don't see any indication that you require a capacity evaluation or assistance managing your affairs. You appear fully competent to make your own decisions. She stood and looked at Rachel. I would recommend family counseling to work through these communication issues, but there's no medical intervention needed here. After Dr. Morrison left, the three of us sat in the living room, the weight of the evening settling around us. Rachel was crying quietly. I was worried about your future, Mom. What happens if you do need help someday? Then we'll address it when that day comes, I said. But Rachel, that decision will be mine to make, with input from family I trust, not something done behind my back. David leaned forward. Rachel, I need to understand something. Was any of what you told me true? The financial problems? The confusion? Rachel was quiet for a long moment. I exaggerated, but I really was worried about her being alone, managing everything by herself. And the loan you asked me to co-sign? I asked. She nodded miserably. When you said no, I got angry. I thought if you couldn't see that I needed help, maybe you weren't thinking clearly about anything. Rachel, if you need financial help, we can discuss it honestly. But trying to take control of my life isn't the answer. The conversation continued past midnight, with tears and admissions and slowly rebuilding trust. Rachel apologized. David committed to better communication with both of us, and I agreed to regular family meetings so everyone could voice concerns openly. By the time my children left, we had scheduled family dinners for every Sunday and agreed that any future concerns about anyone's well-being would be discussed together, not behind each other's backs. If you're dealing with a family member who seems to be undermining your independence, document everything, trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Sometimes the people who claim to be protecting us are actually protecting their own interests. Family relationships are complicated, but honesty and direct communication can solve problems that manipulation and secrets only make worse.